In this episode of the Tech Stack, big happenings in the data center market, and Trump tariffs get slapped by the Supreme Court. Next. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a very exciting Friday to the Tech Stack. We have lots to cover, lots of happenings in the data center this week, and then a big announcement today on Trump tariffs getting the smackdown from the Supreme Court. With me, as always, my fellow analysts, sharpshooters, Jim McGregor from Tirius Research and Mark Vina from Smart Tech Research. Happy Friday, gentlemen. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Dave.
Happy Friday, David.
We got a lot to chew on. Let's cover the news flash first. Let's talk about the landmark decision from the Supreme Court saying that Trump tariffs, I guess, are unconstitutional, and really the market reacting very favorably to the whole ordeal. Gentlemen, I know you guys have been tracking this. This is a definitely uncharted territory for sure. But let's go through it. What are your thoughts? What are your key takeaways? What does this do for the market near term and the market long term? Who's impacted the most out of the gate? What are the puts and takes? Mark, why don't we start with you, and then we'll have Jim chime in with his sage wisdom on this.
Sure. Well, first of all, this is why, being in the tech industry is such a great job, because you wake up in the morning, you turn the news on, hey, a big Supreme Court decision that affects everyone, frankly. And I think first and foremost, if you listen to the initial hearings a few months ago, and I believe it or not, I like to listen to that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting. You kind of got the feeling when you hear the questions that the justices of the Supreme Court asked, and I think this decision is not a surprise. I think most people believe that the Supreme Court was going to strike it down, but it's not over until it's over, and it jolts the market when the decision becomes official, and we got, the market has reacted very positively to it, because I think they feel, I think the market believes that this will create some certainty now that these tariffs are gone. The variable in this, of course, is that if you listen to some of the constitutional experts on this, like Jonathan Turley is a terrific constitutional professor out of Washington, D.C., he would say very clearly, and he did actually, because I heard him opine on this, is that he says very specifically, Trump does have a couple of, several other curveballs that he can throw into things, and that would absolutely create more uncertainty. And even if let's call it like it is. Let's say they wanted to codify the tariffs. Even if that were to pass the House of Representatives, because they do have a slight majority, I don't think they'll ever get 60 votes in the Senate. They may get 51. They may get. I think the Republicans have a two or three seat majority, but they won't get 60. So it almost becomes the path in the Congress to get this codified. Any type of tariffs, it becomes very challenging. So I'm pleased that the market has reacted positively. It may be a short-term thing, because that Trump is going to come out and start arguing that, hey, I've got some other levers, some other laws that have been passed that I can hook these tariffs to. So again, I think it's going to be an interesting what happens now.
Absolutely. I'm of two minds a little bit when it comes to the subject of tariffs. I mean, I think the broad sweeping, price hikes that he levied upon so many countries and industries were, a little too far in spots for sure. But, I also get the notion of a little bit of applied pressure where you have leverage, the art of the deal and all that fun stuff, can have some positive gains for America. But Jim, I know you probably have a deeper opinion on this. What are your thoughts there, fella?
You called my opinions my sage. How about we go raging maniac on this one? Why is this a surprise to you? Why is this? It was illegal. Well, and he did this under the Emergency Powers Act, and it was struck down by the Supreme
Yeah.
Court 6-3 decision that it wasn't legal, it wasn't constitutional. Not only the tariffs he initiated, but also the reciprocal tariffs that he initiated, because that is the responsibility of the U.S. Congress, not the president, to be able to do that. So, yeah, I think we're going to see more threats and everything else about how he's going to do this. But let's face it, this was put in the hands of Congress for a reason. He needs to either work with Congress, which is going to be a challenge with a thin majority, especially in the Senate, as Mark indicated. But this is and this has had a huge impact, especially on the tech industry. I mean, when all these tariffs were announced, everyone let's face it, for most of last year, all the companies, if you asked the CEOs, CFOs, CTOs, everyone, how is this going to impact you? They're like, we don't know, because changing day to day, it was creating so much uncertainty in the market, so much uncertainty in the industry to be able to know how this is going to react. And so, I mean, I think this is good. We need to get back to free market, and we need to put the hands back into Congress. And I'm not saying that there's not imbalances in trade. There are, and those have to be addressed. But it needs to be addressed in a rational manner. And the fact that people are, thinking this is a surprise just amazes me. It was an illegal move.
Yeah. Well said. I think we'll see how this plays out in the weeks and months ahead. I think, Mark, you hit the nail on the head. I think there's going to be a little bit of up and down on this whole situation. But it's fascinating to watch, another first in U.S. history going on here.
Can I add one more thought?
Please do.
And the thing that I think concerns me is that the reaction from the left, and this is not a political podcast, so I want to be clear about that. But I get concerned when I hear, language, and Jim, I know you're a well-balanced guy, so don't take this the wrong way. But when someone says,
by whose standards?
And here I want to be clear about this. Yes, the Supreme Court says it's the president's executive power and emergency power in this regard was illegal. Every president going back 200 years has issued executive orders, and just because the Supreme Court struck it down, yes, that's illegal, but it doesn't make Trump a tyrant. It doesn't make him a king. And I know you were not suggesting that, so I want to be clear about that. So I know you didn't say that, but the reality is that what I am concerned about is the reaction in that they're going to celebrate, the Supreme Court did the right thing here. Yet when they decide in a different way that the Supreme Court should be blown up, or they should add 50 justices to it. So I get a little unwired, get wired up about that. But my closing comment is just that I think the relaxation that we're going to see in the market. Now there's going to be some certainty. It's going to be short-lived because Trump. It's going to happen today. Trump has got something back in the bullpen, and he's going to wheel it out, and that may kind of completely countermand the goodness that the market is seeing right now. So that's my just closing observation.
Yeah, well, hey, I think we've all in our tenure have seen the market react in many different ways for a lot of different reasons. So, and trying to predict what it's going to do and how it's going to affect the major players that it's a crapshoot,
No,
so
and that's true. But the industry, I would say, the world economy and the industry needs clarity. And at least the U.S. was a basis for that clarity before all this tariff stuff started.
Yes,
it was a basis for stability, and we lost that. And I think that brings a lot more into the market when at least we can plan for things. I mean, the way it was done. I'm not saying it was bad, but the way it was done was bad. So the implementation was bad, and I'm happy that, and as an engineer, I look at everything, and this is probably bad. It's a 1 or a 0. It's black or white, but you got to read the letter of the law. You got to read the intent, and you have to read, we have a divided system in the U.S. for government for a reason, and that needs to be respected.
Checks and balances, baby. Checks and balances. And you're right. It was a lot. It was a little too much, too fast. So here we are today, and we're living through it. So interesting stuff. We'll close on that note. Thanks for your takeaways, fellas. I'll be watching the market these days, the old 401k. Just worry about the 401k, baby.
That's all it's about. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So let's talk about data center happenings, because I think tech is a little bit more in our wheelhouse than the geopolitical landscape, right? So let's talk about Meta's deepening relationship and partnership with NVIDIA, announcing with NVIDIA this week that they are deploying Grace and Vera CPUs, and of course Blackwell and Rubin GPUs, and Spectrum-X networking from NVIDIA across a multi-year roadmap alignment agreement. Literally millions of GPUs was the quote. This is a big deal. It is a soup to nuts design win for NVIDIA, an entire platform, also with software and security involved. So NVIDIA's confidential computing platform will now serve as a secure enclave for WhatsApp moving forward with this deal once they get things rolled out and implemented. So a lot of big commitments from Meta here with NVIDIA. The numbers on this deal have kind of been all over the map. NVIDIA, I've talked to a couple of people at NVIDIA that say it's north of 100 billion. I've heard from other sources that it's somewhere less than that. But millions of GPUs in any framework is a lot of money and big dollars. Why don't we start with Jim? What are your key takeaways here? A lot going on, big numbers, big deal, and big partnership for even roadmap alignment and co-development. What are your thoughts?
Well, do you want Sage Jim, Crazy Jim, or Balanced Jim?
I'll take the balanced Sage Jim advice, please. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you hit the nail on the head, and this is an important announcement. And now, seeing announcements between Meta and NVIDIA is not unusual. Matter of fact, they're also talking recently about working together on metaverses, and yes, they are still a real thing. Leveraging NVIDIA's Omniverse solutions. So is this just another announcement between two companies that have been very tightly aligned? No, it's a little bit more than that. This is a multi-generational announcement. And to understand this, they talked about having, using the Grace and Vera CPUs, using the Blackwell and the Rubin GPUs. They talked about using Spectrum-X, and they talked about using the software. You have to understand that despite developing its own rack standards, matter of fact, the OCP standard that's now used for Helios, AMD's Helios, NVIDIA is Meta is essentially using the NVL72. They talked about this at Hot Chips last year. They have a modified NVL72 rack. So they're not taking the complete NVL72 from NVIDIA, but they are taking the entire technology stack that goes in there. They're still going to make their own adjustments and changes to it for their own requirements. But they're essentially taking the rest of it, where they could and have in the past taken just bits and parts of it to build their own systems. They're essentially taking the entire NVIDIA stack. And we pegged that at around $100 billion investment over the next couple of years. So yes, this is a huge investment for Meta, and it is a huge announcement for NVIDIA.
Yeah, big time announcement. For me, one of my takeaways was that this is definitely a beachhead forming, at least in Meta, for Grace CPUs, for CPU architecture from NVIDIA in the rack. I think it puts pressure on x86 incumbents and even ARM, based, insurgents that are coming, new data center architectures that are coming in, and it locks in, at least a percentage of Meta's demand on the CPU side to NVIDIA. So that's a big thing. We all know that Meta is also working on their own AI accelerator. I think that's more bespoke for certain applications that they may have, mostly inference, but NVIDIA is the big dog in terms of training, certainly as well, and very high throughput inference. So interesting stuff for sure. Mark, what are your takeaways here?
One thing about that, it's not just the Grace CPU, it's also Vera CPU.
Vera, next generation
and
too.
the next generation.
Yeah.
And one of the questions we've been getting is, okay, does this mean that they're going to, because they mentioned both cloud and AI. So does this mean that they're going to be using these Grace and Vera CPUs for other applications other than AI workloads?
Yeah.
Now Meta hasn't indicated that, but obviously this is a data center resource. It could be used for other types of workloads. I still think it's going to be dedicated mostly towards AI, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do find opportunities, because that's the whole thing about a data center and the whole thing about a cloud vendor. You try to maximize the ROI by matching workloads to the particular resource. So this may mean we may see some of those traditional or other types of cloud workloads go towards those CPUs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and when you think about what Grace is versus Vera, Grace is, basically off the shelf ARM Neoverse. Vera is supposed to be a much more custom core ARM based solution. I think it's like 88 cores or something like that. So I think Meta likes what they see coming down the pipeline. Mark, what are your thoughts, bud?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, you wrote a very thoughtful note on LinkedIn, which I thought really captured the essence and aligns with where my head is. The one thing you reference in your note, but we haven't referenced here, is that there is that networking piece, the Spectrum X Ethernet component, which I think is proof positive that Meta feels very strongly that you really need to have great. You can only drive great data center efficiency with great interconnect. And of course, Spectrum X Ethernet provides that. So it's really a big win. When you're talking about numbers like 100 billion, I mean, it's hard to wrap your arms around that. That's not just a casual partnership. And from a Meta standpoint, it really portends, especially with the roadmap alignment component, that Meta really sees itself as an AI company, deploying AI in WhatsApp, which is a big deal, deploying AI in a metaverse type of application. The metaverse hasn't really got a lot of traction, but this certainly could help with that. But also with their other big platforms like Facebook, which people, maybe it's because I'm getting old. Facebook is still a relevant platform for many users. It's got a huge audience still, despite kids who like to use TikTok all the day. But it just goes to show you how strongly Meta feels that AI is going to have a powerful component in their go-to-market strategy vis-a-vis their platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff for sure. And absolutely, I think NVIDIA's acquisition years back of Mellanox has paid in spades for that company time and time again. And this is one of those times, Spectrum X based on Mellanox technology. So good stuff for sure. But AMD also had some announcements this week in sovereign AI with India, I believe, right, Jim? So Tata Consulting Services expanded their strategic collaboration for India sovereign AI, and AMD's rack scale Helios architecture platform is going to power that. Jim, what are your high levels on that one?
Yeah, no, this is important. I mean, obviously, we've talked about this in the past. It's not just the build out of AI for data set for hyperscalers or for neoclouds and enterprise. It's also a need for sovereign AI country by country by country or region by region. And winning one of those on a relatively new platform is a huge win for AMD. Now they're going to be working basically AMD is going to be working with a subsidiary of TCS called Hypervault. That's going to be developing something based on the Helios architecture using the latest EPYC processors, the latest MI400 series AI accelerators, and Pensando networking solution. So, I mean, it's basically a top to bottom solution. And this is important. Obviously for sovereign AI, security is very, very important, and having a platform that's expandable and usable. And if it's going to be used by the government, you would expect that you're going to see other usage throughout industry in the country. So it's a big win for AMD to be able to secure this for India as it builds out its AI infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any numbers on it? Do we know? It's just, I mean, it's big. I mean, you talk about sovereign AI infrastructure for India. So
there are no numbers on it yet, but once you're talking, I mean, just look at what the U.S. does with its major supercomputers. I would
Yeah.
put it on the line with that. I mean, we're going to be expecting probably an ever expanding number, starting with probably several thousand GPUs and possibly going to millions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the other thing there is, again, I think it's proof positive that AMD has all the pieces in place now for an entire platform solution, whether it be the Helios rack architecture. That Pensando networking is no joke. They're 400 gig smart NICs. Really, again, just the full platform, and why they are truly a competitor now to NVIDIA on almost every level. Mark, what are your key takeaways with this one?
Yeah, my views are exactly what yours are, Dave. I think that it's a significant win for AMD. It's another credibility piece that they can put in their arsenal, which I think is great. I mean, and this is unfair for me to say because NVIDIA gets a lot of the headlines, but AMD quietly chalks up these wins. They had a solid year last year. They obviously have there's big expectations around AMD this year, but they're really positioning themselves as a very credible alternative to NVIDIA. And and we've talked about this before. And AMD's brand persona tends to be much more cost effectiveness. That was true about AMD in the CPU space, in the GPU space as well. But certainly they're applying that kind of philosophy, I think, from a pricing standpoint to the data center as well. And hey, that's not a bad place to be. And I'm sure, from an India perspective, that probably was a significant component, in terms of the cost efficiency piece. But I support your way of thinking on this. I think it's a big win. It just doesn't get the headlines that NVIDIA gets, which I think is a bit unfair.
Hey, I think the key takeaway from both of these is the fact that it's no longer a story about the GPU. It's really a story about the platform, and we're seeing that with both of these announcements. That you have to that the platform is important. Having the networking, having the CPU, having the GPU, having the software stack that goes on top of it. It is a platform story. Whether they're taking an entire rack or they're taking pieces of the rack, it's still a platform story.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's one of the underpinnings that we don't highlight enough, I think, and that's the fact that AMD's ROCm stack is now solid enough to get these big design wins. Because they were missing on that, misfiring on that for a little while, but these major design wins are again proof positive that they've arrived. So good stuff for sure for AMD. Let's close back on NVIDIA real quick. We get GTC coming up. We have all kinds of announcements, earnings actually next week. I'm actually going to be talking to the folks at Schwab Network on that one. That's going to be interesting. I think we're looking at another bang up quarter just personally, but that's not rocket science, right? But let's talk about expectations at GTC. There's a surprise chip that Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, teased earlier this week. Jim, what do you think we're sniffing here?
That's definitely got everybody buzzing. Are they going to be talking about Rubin Ultra? Are they going to be talking about the next generation Feynman? Are they going to be talking about maybe something that's developed in conjunction with Grok because they acquired their assets late last year? Or as you pointed out, Dave, could this be maybe a PC processor, the N1 or N1X, I believe, that they're working on? So it's interesting. He says it's going to surprise everyone. We're going to be amazed. There's going to be a bunch of new chips announced at GTC. So, and I know all the people at NVIDIA are heads down working on the GTC, the event, and all the announcements that are going to come out, which is it's kind of like a dam opening its floodgates whenever you go to GTC. Jensen hops on stage, and it's a struggle to even keep up with all the announcements. So it's going to be exciting. I mean, it is interesting that he teased that so early, but I don't know. Is it data center? Is it PC? I'm tending to think it's more towards a data center, just because I think that's the biggest focus for GTC. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Mark, I'm going to let you go, and then I'll back clean up. But Jim, there's a lot we're going to be drinking from the fire hose. You and I are both going to be there. Mark, are you going to GTC?
No, because I'm going to be at another client event at the same time. I wish I was. Because GTC is a very exciting event, and it's got, and it gets more exciting when the CEO of NVIDIA teases something like this. What I hope for is that there've been rumors about NVIDIA, coming to market with a chip that could be used as both a processor as well as a GPU. So they get into the traditional PC space. I don't know whether that is going to happen here, but certainly that could be something that could be special enough. But I'm always, what's interesting about GTC, and Dave, you'll see it, I know, Jim, you'll see it, is about the other partners that make big announcements while they're there. And we already are aware confidentially of some companies that will be making announcements at GTC to kind of leverage the momentum you see there. But I think right now, Jensen's got everybody salivating. What is this new chip going to be? And the only thing I would say, and it would be interesting, Dave and Jim, to get your reaction to this. It's so funny that the cadence for designing and delivering chips used to be a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. And it's almost like now a yearly cadence, and that, competition will do that. You got to stay, but it's amazing. When you wrap your head around, let's say this is a next generation Rubin, for lack of a better, if that happens to be. I mean, that's pretty amazing when you consider the fact that they just got that other processor out into the market. So it's just amazing. The speed to market blows me away, and it's nothing like it was 5 years ago.
Well, we should clarify there that it still takes 2, 3, or even longer to design a new chip. It's just that now these companies, especially companies like Intel, NVIDIA, and AMD, have multiple design projects going on simultaneously. So, so when we get to that annual cadence, even when we look at smartphones, the same thing there. To get to that annual cadence, you have to have significant engineering resources to be able to have multiple designs going simultaneously.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've talked about this in the past as well, but I also think there's a fair amount of design automation these days that wasn't around in years past. When you look at the guys at Synopsys and Cadence with, AI assisted design space optimization, floor planning of chips, where you just, you feed the design to the machine, and instead of having a team of verification and optimization engineers, you now just have the beast working on it 24/7, no coffee breaks, no sleeping. That's a huge engineering resource lift that frees up engineers to go do creative things and get to market quicker, better designs faster.
And
so
Siemens, all
does that
three of
too,
the big EDA vendors, and the fact that they go, these design tools go from basically concept of silicon layout all the way through system design and verification. So you're not just really designing a chip anymore. You're designing a platform all the way through and testing it to make sure it meets those requirements before you even actually have RTL.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting stuff. I mean, we'll have to save this for another podcast, but like Cadence had a little demo last week called their ChipStack, AI ChipStack software. It's integrated with their tools now, or they're integrating it with their tools. And they literally show it getting, a design description and generating RTL real time. And it's like, would have taken an engineer a day's worth of work, and it's just spitting it out, So it's like, wow. It's amazing stuff. We're on the cusp of some very exciting things. I'm going to finish up quickly with my takes on GTC, and we'll wrap for the day. Yeah, Jim, I think you're right. I think it's going to be a little of everything. I think we're all expecting Vera Rubin information. I think we're going to get a lot more on that. Matter of fact, I was talking with Ian Buck earlier this week at NVIDIA, and I do think there's going to be some major disclosures there. However, I do think the surprise chip that Jensen was speaking of was the PC chip. I think it's going to be, and he's mentioned, they're working on a PC chip. So this isn't NDA information. I think it's going to be N1, N1X. That is the surprise. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that impacts the Windows on ARM ecosystem. We know Qualcomm with Snapdragon made some very big inroads and a big splash with Microsoft and Copilot PCs, back in the day, a couple of years ago. But this is going to be, if they can execute and get this thing out the door. Haven't heard enough of it from OEMs, I will say that. But if they can execute and get this thing out the door and make the kind of impact they're capable of, it could be a landmark moment for Windows on ARM and PC again. So I'm excited. I hope that's it. I hope that's one of them.
and you hit the nail on the head there. It's not just the chip, it's also Windows support. So they would have to have Windows support for that major impact, and we'll have to wait and see if that comes with it.
Yeah. More fun ahead for us. Never a dull moment, and no sleep or rest for the weary, right?
Yep.
All right, fellas. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was fun breaking down the news. We had a lot of it this week. Folks, if you wouldn't mind, make sure you like and subscribe so you get notified when we have another Tech Stack episode fired up for you. We try and get these out weekly. We try and get them live on the road. And then, of course, engage with us in the comments. We love to answer your questions, any burning questions you have, or ruminate ourselves on whatever might be going through your mind. We like to chat it up. So hit us up on the comment section, on our socials. You can find us everywhere on the web at YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. We'll be doing the new iTunes video too, I'm sure. But until next time, we look forward to catching you on the Tech Stack.